Hey there, this is Arash. I'm a photographer based in Southern California, a portraitist at heart, but a marketing, tourism, and lifestyle photographer by trade. And today's video is entitled, I don't take pictures, I shoot portraits. So, what the crap does that mean? I don't take pictures, I shoot portraits. I've had this funny meme in my files for quite some time that always brings me joy looking at it. And it shows a bunch of different paintings from famous classical painters, painters from the Baroque era and the Renaissance, and it's self-portraits of the artist. And the text over the meme says, "Never apologize for selfies." And that topic has always been particularly interesting to me because it is sort of where I started to explore and end up at where we have ended up today at this video. Anyone can take a picture. And honestly, with today's technology and with the amount of practice that the average person gets to have with this amazing camera that's in your phone right now, the playing field's pretty even. Figuring out the difference between levels of photography has, in my opinion, less to do with technology than it ever has. I read an article header a while back that really stuck with me. It said, the camera that you have in your phone right now is a better camera than what Ansel Adams had access to. And that's just and I'm sure we can break down like the background and the aspect ratio and all that, but like what I'm saying is just like what the article is saying is, technologically speaking, what you have in your hand is this advanced alien supercomputer. And it is so much more advanced than what Ansel Adams had access to. But he still created these absolutely powerful, timeless images because he wasn't just taking pictures, he was making art. And even with the selfies and the self-portrait back and forth, like that always amuses me because when a painter, I'm blanking on the names right now, sorry, all my art history professors. I don't remember most of the names, but I do remember there was a lot of self-portraits. And these were like spectacularly done. If you want to look at someone whose self-portraits have made powerful impacts on culture and society, look at Frida Kahlo. Like those, she had many self-portraits which moved people deeply. And I think a strong argument could be made that the technology that exists in your phone and what you're doing with that selfie, it's kind of the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, obviously, but it's kind of a leapfrog roundabout same thing. Self-portrait or a selfie. A self-portrait basically is a much more thought-out version of a selfie. A selfie is when you've just used the technology to leap ahead of the art making process and you're just using the technology to hit a button. And I think that there are absolutely selfies that start to verge on the level of art, but then you get into self-portrait territory and what you're looking at is art making. And that's a similar, and it's very kind of aligned with what I'm kind of getting at about how I work, is I'm not taking pictures, I'm shooting portraits. Because the camera equipment that I have in my hand, I just randomly wanted to make sure I'm still recording. The camera equipment that I have actually doesn't really matter. I can pick up any camera and work with it. The majority of what I do as a portrait photographer has very little to do with the camera. And I'm sure there are some very advanced photographers out there and color graders and editors that are looking at my photos and going, yeah, bro, we can tell. But yeah, I have not actually gone after the diagnosis, but pretty strong probability that I'm dyslexic. And early on in my photography journey, when I was trying to figure out what my voice is and what attracted me and where I felt like I was in flow state, I noticed very quickly that when I was spending too much time looking at the shutter speed and trying to figure out the equations on my camera for lighting and such, I would kind of freeze. It was like a fight, flight, or freeze response, and good stuff wasn't really coming out. When I let go of it, the more I learned to let go of it, the better my work got. The more I got into flow state. And what I learned over the years is that my superpower as a storyteller and as an artist is a deep personal connection with my subject matter. So, whereas another more technically inclined photographer might look at a setup and, paint the backdrop and come up with the kinds of lenses they would like to use for a photo shoot, all of my focus is on my subject, is the person. What is the story of this person? How are we connecting with each other? What part of who they are am I working to bring out into the surface? When I'm looking at the environment, how is this person and the story of everything they have ever been arrive at that moment and connect and interact in order to capture this one moment in time where we get to truly see this person? Not just look at them, see them. And I think that that's the difference between being, for example, a commercial photographer or a portraitist. A commercial photographer typically is much more technically inclined. The superpower of a commercial photographer is their ability to create spectacular, glossy images that can be placed on billboards, and every little corner of it with the proper photo editing and focus reflects perfectly and shines and makes you want to go out and buy that product, makes you want to go buy the iPhone, right? But I think as a portraitist, my approach to it is all of that is secondary. The only thing that really matters to me is the windows to the soul, and that's the eyes. And I'm usually just kind of navigating around all the other stuff. I had an inquiry pop up today, which is actually extremely common. So if the person who made the inquiry is watching, I can assure you it's probably not you, because it literally, this is a question that comes up all the time when I'm getting inquiries. They're like, hey, it's usually something around the idea that they need a headshot or they want to schedule a portrait session, and they're trying to figure out where in their day they can schedule it. Like, hey, I have time at 4 p.m. on so-and-so, can we do family portraits for an hour? And honestly, my first instinct is to say no. Because it's not the way I work. And I've done it. And I can do it. It's not to say that I can't shoot photos for an hour and give you a memory card. It's not what brings me joy. And I don't think my best work comes out of that. Yes, I can take a clean image for you and turn it in if you're on a deadline and you need this photo real quick. In fact, with headshot sessions, I've basically learned how to bang those out in 20 minutes, because I don't see that so much as high art. It's just it's a very quick product turnaround that often folks need. And I'll do another video about what headshots are like at some point. But with portraits, the way that I work is I want at least a couple of hours set aside. And it's not because we're going to be shooting for 2 hours. I want us to settle into the energy, because I have experienced what it's like when we're not settled into the energy. When someone is watching their watch and they have a next appointment to get to, They're not fully there with me. And again, there are gigs where, sure, you want to pay me my day rate for that photo, like, I'll take your money. But if we really want to create, and it is a collaboration, it's truly both of us showing up together. If we want to create this timeless image, a true portrait, which captures the essence of who my subject is, who the model is, it's not something that I like to treat as a thing to be checked off of the list today. So when I do portrait sessions, I typically schedule them in half-day bookings, and I don't do more than one a day. In fact, it's probably going to be my only booking that day. So even though I'm getting paid for a half-day rate, you're basically getting a full-day commitment from me. And when I'm shooting a portrait, I am not just showing up to the location and taking the photo. I am meditating on my subject ahead of time. I am journaling. I am showing up to our location ahead of time in order to visualize some potential angles and backdrops and ways that my subject can interact with the physical environment in a way that brings out their essence. And then afterwards I'm decompressing, because it is a deep, personal, energetic exchange that is happening for me. When I'm shooting portraits is a very intimate experience. It's me and you, your family, your engagement photos, whatever it is. It's not something that I'm squeezing in between the hours. Now, I have absolutely had gigs where a producer or an executive assistant or something is scheduling everything and working around it. And what's happening is that me and that producer or that executive assistant, the person who I'm photographing, has outsourced part of this experience to their assistant or to the producer. And we do tend to do those in like event photos or in documentary, behind the scenes stuff. Like that kind of work absolutely does happen. But if I'm dealing with the client directly and they have commissioned me to do this kind of work, and what they are asking for is a portrait, not just a picture, because you could just give your phone to your friend and they could take a picture. But if you want to legitimately commission a portrait, it's going to be a little bit more commitment for both of us. We're going to set that time aside. We're going to communicate ahead of time in order to get to know each other and connect more deeply. And then come the day of our shoot, we're fully landing into this experience. And that's where the magic comes out. And the funny thing is, the magic, by the way, usually is not the backdrop that I've chosen or some technical thing that I've come up with. The magic moment is we do all of this and then we forget about all of it. One of my favorite stories of a timeless, important, powerful portrait, because I look at the timeless images, I look at elegance and timelessness, that's really what moves me. I love the story of James Dean, this very, very famous portrait of him where he's like sitting there on these apple boxes backstage, behind scenes, and he's having a cigarette and looking right into the camera. And the story behind that photo, I have it in one of my portrait books here, I don't remember the name of the photographer, but in that photo it was like this big elaborate setup that they were shooting, had like backup dancers and lighting and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't, they did his hair, all this work was being done. And when they were just shifting some lighting around, James Dean sat down to take a little break. And on his little break, he had his feet kicked up, he's having a cigarette. Photographer sees that, shoots it, and that ends up being the timeless image of James Dean. And nobody can remember whatever the other one is with the backup dancers and the lighting and all that. So that's a lot of what I'm doing. I'm doing portraits. We're doing all of this planning and intention setting and moving in that energy, and then there's like this moment that the universe gives us this gift. This one moment where you forget the camera's there and I'm in flow state and the lighting is just right and everything feels right and we get it. And that's a portrait. So it's like I always say, what I do as a photographer, maybe 20% of it is the camera. Alright, that's all for now. If you have any questions, comments, I'd love to hear from you. At Mr. Arash, MrArash.com, all that other stuff for blah blah blah. That was a terrible sign off. I love you all. Ciao.